Most of us don't expect to become care partners, and there can be lots of ups and downs. This video brings together stories from a group of care partners sharing what we have learnt from our experience supporting someone living with dementia. Everyone's situation is different, and you need to do what's right for you and the person you support. A lot of things you don't know unless you've had personal experience. From our experience, there are a number of things that we think are helpful to know when you are supporting a person living with dementia. Knowing about dementia?
Initially, we found that all the information that was available from different organisations was overwhelming for us, and just processing it became quite difficult.
Advocating for the person you care for?
I think putting Con into care was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
Finding the support you need, it takes a village.
It's really important our friends maintain their connection with us. It makes a huge difference to our lives.
Without the support of my parents' many friends, I wouldn't have been able to keep her at home for nearly as long.
Finding humour and joy.
Mum really gave us that gift of slowing down and really looking at what sparks joy for all of us.
It gives me great pleasure to see her in that moment and enjoying that.
My name's Anne, and I've been a carer for my husband, who's been living with dementia for 30 years. We hope this story will highlight some of the positive and rewarding aspects of caring for a person with dementia. We'd like to share some of the things that can help us and the person we care for to make the most of life. Carers come in all shapes and sizes. Some of us have had jobs that might help us understand dementia and the services available. Some of us have a view of the world that can make caring easier or harder. Our culture and language can impact the experiences and expectations. And also, where we live can impact the range of services available to us. Becoming a carer may feel like a natural part of being in a relationship, but for some people, it might feel the opposite. It changes your life plans, but you can get through this. With dementia impacting over 400,000 Australians and growing, this will become a part of life for many of us.
I did not expect in my early 50s, having had both my kids just move out of home, to end up being the primary carer for my mum, who has Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, she got ill at the end of last year, and so she's now in aged care, but I'm still her only support person, really. My brother lives overseas.
For me, when I became a carer, and for our family, we were all thrown in at the deep end. It took us a long time to even call ourselves carers.
Dementia is an umbrella term used to describe a large number of diseases that cause a decline in thinking, problem-solving, memory, and performing everyday activities. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia, but there are many other causes, including vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, and frontotemporal dementia. Dementia is often described in phases, mild, moderate, and severe, but symptoms can fluctuate, and the rate of progression will vary depending on many factors. Different diseases can target specific areas of the brain, partly accounting for the variation in symptoms and behaviours. While the stages and impact of dementia change over time, everyone's experiences and their needs are also different.
People can now be diagnosed at earlier stages of disease, and therefore at a time when they might be in paid employment, travelling, living independently at home and on their own. In fact, 70% of people with dementia live at home either independently or with their family.
Dementia, I think, is often seen as being about being forgetful, memory loss. But one thing it is that people don't take into account is that the physical mobility is impaired. And that gradually worsens over time. So that's where, as a carer, you need to provide that help. That's the toughest.
As carers, we often get given advice from those who don't understand our situation. They may see the person with dementia briefly on a good day and wonder what you were talking about.
Oh, when we went out, he could be the life of the party for a couple of hours. It looked almost as though he was fine. And then we'd walk outside and he wouldn't know where the car was, he wouldn't know where we were, he wouldn't know who he'd been with, he'd hardly know me. And then the mood swings would come and, the full Alzheimer's would appear by the time we got home. But anyone at the lunch would not have realised, just how far he was advanced with his Alzheimer's.
Her friends would get this really together person who was able to convince them she was fine. And she'll have these amazing conversations with her friends and she can convince them of absolutely anything. It's amazing. And so, recently I got phone calls from two of her friends who'd had these conversations with her over the weekend saying, "Oh, I hear your mum's going home." And I'm like, no. And it's only when they spend a bit more time with her or they spend a bit more time over a number of different days as she goes through her mood swings that they see the real Alzheimer's impact. And but that particular situation was quite difficult because they were ringing me to say, "That's great, what can we do to help? We know." And I'm like, no. And then I got the questions about, but why can't she go home? She seems fine. And that was really hard for me. I was feeling very invalidated by them and being questioned as to whether I was doing the right thing for my mum.
With his GP, he had his GP completely convinced he was all right because he'd go along and they'd swap stories and, everything was lovely. And I'd try and, because you feel as though you're going mad because there's such a change. It fluctuates so much that you begin to doubt yourself, like, maybe this is me, it's not him. But I was trying to get the GP to, really, I think there's something wrong here, but the GP just wouldn't believe it because you kind of convince him that he was fine.
Mum had to go through several assessment processes and one of the things we realised was she presented very well in those assessments and didn't appear to have dementia. And it sort of clicked that maybe it was because in her working life she was a teacher and she was used to the whole thing of tests and being tested and testing people. And so she actually was quite comfortable in that process. So when, as her dementia progressed, I certainly would say to the assessment officers, you need to be very observant when you're going through the assessment process. And they were able to reassure me that they did have some checks built into the assessment tool to be able to correctly judge the situation.
One thing you learn as a carer is that we can't always live up to other people's expectations. But possibly more frustrating and painful is that we can't always live up to our own expectations and standards due to exhaustion, sadness, and sense of loss and conflicting emotions. There are often expectations about when and whether the person needs to go into residential aged care, but often we aren't told of the range of services that help support people at home.
Our friends or neighbours or people that we vaguely knew would say to us, "Oh, look, why have you taken this on board? It's far too hard. Why don't you consider putting your mother-in-law into a home?" Well, at that stage, no, we didn't want to do that. That wasn't her wishes. She always told us that that would be the last thing that she wanted to do. So it was juggling that, and it was very, very hard. And it took a family counselling session for us to actually address that whole idea of caring, bringing my mother-in-law into our home unit, and how we as individuals can each contribute and deal with that. And it was only after that that we started celebrating. Yes, some days were harder than others, but wow, it was nice. There were a lot of quality moments and celebrations that we could have.
We did put her in an aged care home for 2 months, but she wasn't happy, so I made the decision to quit work and to become her full-time carer for 3 years, and it was the most rewarding experience of my life, for sure. No doubt about that.
There are times when residential placement is the best option for us and the person with dementia. Not being able to continue to provide care for a loved one with dementia at home should not be seen as failure. Rather, should be seen as acceptance that greater shared care is needed to provide the level of quality care needed at that point in time.
I think putting Con into care was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. The most painful. I still think often was it too early? But, everyone does what is right for them. I knew I couldn't keep him safe. And then, I was told that I had 24 hours to make the decision. And this was a good place. And so in 24 hours, we had to make that decision. And I spoke to his family, his daughters, and, it was a sort of family decision, but painful for everybody.
It freed you up to be you again and to have the relationship that you had before without the dementia
getting in the way
so much.
Yeah, it did. It was lovely. It's almost like we readjusted to a different relationship. Heard afterwards a couple of my friends. I just couldn't understand why I didn't see them, and then I heard that they thought I had put him into care too early, which was pretty hurtful. We don't want to be criticised or judged. We're pretty good at doing that to ourselves, and coming from outside just makes it worse. So a little more non-judgmental support would be very welcome.
In my situation, I've got so many decisions to make, and it's extremely hard to make most of those decisions. So to have people who are willing to support and not question every single decision is really helpful.
It takes a community to support someone with dementia and the person who's supporting them. Keep connected, don't drift away because you feel unsure about what to do or say. The best way to find out how you can help us is to ask us.
I became my mother-in-law's primary carer, but what we found over time is that we needed a whole village to look after her. What we needed as a family and what my mother-in-law needed was to tap into lots and lots of different people to come and help us with the caring. So we even had a carer that would come into the home and take my mother-in-law out for outings, sort of to the gallery or to the cafe when we were working. And that showed us that all that love and time that everyone was spending was giving her the quality of life, that it wasn't just one person that managed her through or cared her through that process, that it was a whole village, that for us to survive, because we were also living in an apartment, so we had neighbours next door and, seeing my mother-in-law in the lift, and of course my mother-in-law didn't even know what a lift was. And so we had to engage those people, we had to engage everyone around us to be able to support and provide that care for her to make her feel comfortable.
After my father passed away, one of the things that I really was appreciative of and realised is that without the support of my parents' many friends, I wouldn't have been able to keep her at home for nearly as long, because they were coming in essentially every lunchtime to have lunch with Mum and spend time with her. And it really is very important for the person with Alzheimer's to have that contact with their friends, but also for, like in my situation where I'm the only carer, I'm the only support person for my mum because my brother's overseas and my father had died. Without those friends, I couldn't have kept her at home as long.
Luckily for Mum, she had 2 close friends who were there, but her other friends do disappear. I think there is a stigma around dementia still, and people are fearful of it. They don't know how to act or how to react, and they're used to seeing someone a certain way, and they've changed and they just can't get used to their idea. I think it can be a very isolating time for the person with dementia and the carer.
Life is about learning to live in the moment, and it can actually be helpful to see the funny side of situations that might otherwise seem bleak.
I've been absolutely amazed and impressed with my mum as how she has managed to deal with the Alzheimer's as it was early on and progressing. And she did come up with ways of managing it for herself by initially writing notes and writing things down. But she's also very inventive with her language. So she works through this process of can't find the word. And she does come out with some incredible things. And one of them is sneeze papers, because she couldn't remember the word for tissues. So I think our family is going to continue to call tissues sneeze papers in the household. It's very funny. And it reminds us of her.
Well, it's really funny. My brother was saying that his experience with Mum more recently is when she's had enough of everything, she sings "Show Me the Way to Go Home," which is what they used to sing at the end of parties in her youthful days. And he thinks, oh, well, there must be a sign somewhere in there that she's had enough. It's time for everyone to head off and her to go back to doing what she does. Yeah.
Even in advanced stages of dementia, there can be moments of love, connection and engagement.
Initially, we found that all the information that was available from different organisations was overwhelming for us, and just processing it became quite difficult. Though over time, we found and discovered ways and means that were applicable to our unique family situation, and then we could celebrate what we were doing, and it brought us great joy and satisfaction in terms of having a family unit and normalising the fact that our nana, my mother-in-law, was a person living with dementia within our unit, and we could celebrate that.
The young physiotherapist said to me that when she'd gone into Mum's room, she'd noticed with what was up on her walls that Mum was from India, and so she started talking to Mum in Hindi, and Mum replied. And well, I just thought that was really amazing, because we came to Australia 50 years ago in 1971. We've always been English speaking, but when we lived in India, Mum would have spoken Hindi in her interactions and, with her work. And clearly she's still retaining that, even though, there's so much else that isn't there now.
I practiced clinical nutrition in counselling centres, and a client once requested that I talk to her family and let them know that she was still alive and not to grieve in front of her. She was really struggling with what was happening to herself, and then seeing that in her loved ones, it was really, really difficult. It's always stuck with me, and I'm really conscious of now not doing that in front of Mum. It's really important to grieve, and it's making it really hard if you do that in front of them as well.
There are a lot of unconscious biases in the community, especially around elderly people and dementia. And one thing that became very apparent for us on one New Year's Eve, we invited friends to our home to watch the fireworks, and my mother-in-law was living with us at the time, and she had agreed that she would like to celebrate and be up for the midnight fireworks and to have a glass of sherry. And through the night, she became quite tired. She dozed off on the couch. And what we found is that some of our family friends, I kept saying, well, look, she's too old to be up, to stay up for the fireworks. She's too old to be drinking sherry. All these preconceived ideas whereas when midnight came, her eyes just lit up and she was just absolutely in seventh heaven and started singing and having her glass of sherry, and we as a family just loved to be able to give her that opportunity, even though she may not remember it. And so that really showed us, gave us an insight into how people think and what sort of judgments they come to events like that with.
So Mum loves music, and when she went into the nursing home, her record player went with her, and for the next 2 years she was able to put that record player on and play her records, which was fantastic. When because at that stage she couldn't recognise me and didn't know I was her daughter, but she could still play the record player. I think it's interesting what effect music has, the kind of things it triggers in someone. So there's something deep inside that's clearly touched by hearing something. So even when other things are no longer familiar to the person living with dementia, that music is still in there and is, creates that moment of joy for the person. And it gives me great pleasure to see my mother, happy in that moment.
So I guess this is where I tell you about Festivus, which is, I think quite a few Seinfeld fans would probably know about Festivus. For me, my rada is finding some sort of purpose in pain. And what we found as a family is if we could concentrate on what sparked joy, for that moment, and then concentrating on the next event and the next adventure, was really important in not being overwhelmed by the grief. And it was such a gift to find out from Mum and to find out from our little ones what sparked joy for each of us, and working on delivering that. We stopped a lot of our work deadlines, and I deferred my thesis year, and we really took stock and grew closer as a family. And finding that spark daily, it was a real gift.
While dementia creates lots of challenges, being a carer can be rewarding. We can experience grief and loss, but we can learn to adapt. We can also cherish the moments we have together and support our relative or friend to maintain their dignity, independence, and human rights.